Have you ever been reading the Bible and just stopped, stared at a sentence and thought, wait, what does that even mean? Well, what if I told you that a huge part of the text isn't meant to be read like a history book at all? That there is a kind of secret language hidden in plain sight? We're going to crack it open today, and it all kicks off with a really, really weird question.
Yeah, you heard me right. Does God have nostrils? It sounds completely absurd, doesn't it? But, if you decide to take the Bible absolutely 100% literally, word for word, you eventually have to deal with passages that say, well, exactly that.
And look, this isn't some obscure verse from a debated translation. This is right there in Psalm 18. Smoke coming out of his nostrils, fire shooting out of his mouth. I mean, what is going on here? If you actually try to picture that, it's bizarre. It's almost cartoonish, and that right there, that's the whole problem.
So this leads us straight to our first big topic. What actually happens when we try to force a rigid, literal reading onto a text that maybe was never intended to be read that way in the first place?
A scholar from back in the 19th century, Milton Spenser, he argued this kind of literalism is a huge mistake. He said it takes these grand, imaginative, mind-blowing concepts and reduces them to what he called crass mechanical notions. I love that phrase. Basically, it forces us to ask silly questions like, so where was God standing when he bent the sky? And when we do that, we completely miss the awe-inspiring point the writer was trying to make.
Okay, so if it's not literal, what is it? Well, the key, the absolute game changer, is understanding that we're often dealing with a totally different kind of communication, the language of poetry.
Terry calls this the pictorial element. You see, ancient Hebrew is a language that's just dripping with metaphor and passion. The authors weren't trying to be journalists filing a report. They were more like painters using words. They were crafting these intense, emotional word pictures designed to make you feel the power, the majesty, the anger of God, not to give you a technical diagram of his anatomy.
And get this isn't just some fringe feature of the text. It's estimated that nearly 2/5, a full 40% of the Old Testament is written in the style and spirit of Hebrew poetry. 40%? That is a massive chunk of scripture that is basically screaming at us to put on a different pair of reading glasses.
Okay, let's dive into this. How does recognizing this pictorial element, this poetic language, actually change everything? Let's circle back to that wild passage in Psalm 18 and see what it looks like through this new lens.
Right, so we're going to look at Psalm 18 not as a literal event report, but as what it really is, a powerful apocalyptic song, a power song, celebrating an incredible moment of deliverance.
It all starts with the psalmist, in deep trouble, crying out to God. And the response? It is not a gentle whisper. The entire planet shakes and trembles because God is angry. The smoke in the nostrils, the fire from the mouth, that's not biology. That's a metaphor for divine fury so intense it feels like a volcano erupting.
And then the imagery just explodes to a cosmic scale. God doesn't just appear, he literally bends the fabric of the heavens to descend. He rides a cherub, a mythical winged creature, and flies on the wings of the wind. I mean, come on, this is pure epic poetry. And the climax is just world-altering. Thunder, lightning, a divine shout so powerful that the oceans part and the very foundations of the world are laid bare. This is a vision of unimaginable power, and the only way to describe it is through the language of cosmic catastrophe. So let's just put it side by side. A literal reading gets completely stuck, right? It's bogged down in impossible physics. But the poetic reading, it unlocks the real meaning. It's not about what God literally did step by step. It's about how incredibly powerful God is. It's a breathtaking word picture of divine intervention, showing how these ancient poets saw God's power in the raw, untamable forces of nature.
Okay, but that brings up a really good question. This incredibly poetic psalm, it's just kind of plopped right in the middle of a historical story in the book of 2 Samuel. Why would they do that?
Well, the answer comes down to a common literary practice back then. Ancient historians just played by a different set of rules than we do. They would often stick poems and songs right into their histories for what Terry calls poetical embellishment. It was their way of cranking up the drama and expressing the deep emotional meaning of an event.
And the process probably went something like this. First, a huge event happens, like a major military victory. Over time, a tradition starts that, hey, a song was probably sung to celebrate it. Then, maybe centuries later, a really talented poet composes an epic song that they feel captures the spirit of that long-ago moment, And finally, a historian putting all the records together inserts that song into the story, connecting it to the original hero.
And you see this pattern all over the Old Testament. Psalm 18 is put into David's life story. The story of Joshua's big battle at Gibeon literally quotes a poem from a lost book of poetry. A Thanksgiving psalm in 1 Chronicles, it's actually stitched together from 3 different later psalms. For the original writers, this was just a normal, powerful way to tell their history.
So now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Because once you have this key, this idea of reading for poetry, it suddenly unlocks all these other passages that can seem really strange to us modern readers.
All of a sudden, other things just start to click. That pillar of cloud and fire in Exodus, was it a literal column of smoke or a powerful, poetic image of God's constant, guiding presence? The famous Song of Moses after crossing the Red Sea is packed with the same kind of epic language. This same lens helps us understand the great prophecies of Jacob and Moses. They read so much more like epic poems about the destiny of nations than like verbatim court transcripts.
So here's the crucial point, the main takeaway. This isn't about asking if these texts are true or inspired. It's about asking how that truth is being communicated. The goal is to find a rational, natural way of reading that actually respects the literary style the ancient authors chose, instead of trying to force it into our modern, literal-minded box.
Another scholar, Herder, put it beautifully. He described Hebrew poetry as a series of pictures, showing a view of the universe that's arranged not by scientific logic, but by the dictates of human feeling. It's a profoundly human way to talk about experiences with the divine, using the most powerful tools we have: imagery, emotion, and metaphor.
And that leaves us with one final thought. When we stop trying to shove a poem into the box of literal history, when we actually let it breathe and speak in its own majestic, figurative language, does that make it less true? Or does it maybe unlock a deeper, more profound truth that a simple list of facts could never, ever capture?